A large number of men have believed that women want manly men, and many famous works of fiction depict masculine icons as womanizers, like Tony Stark or James Bond. But these characters can be interpreted as power fantasies and were ultimately created by and for men. So, of course, these characters are going to be setting the standard for men if they want to be seen as attractive. Thus, men need to exhibit certain traits, such as manliness or emotional distance or confidence. But how does women's media depict attractive men? What traits do movies written by or for women give to the male characters that the female protagonist loves or despises? And how can a male, such as myself, make sense of these findings? These are the questions I aim to answer in this video, so spoiler warning for the following. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. So first off, what exactly does a woman look for in a man? Well, there's no real definitive answer to such a question, as attraction and standards of beauty differ greatly depending on the demographic. For example, a person that's incredibly attractive in the United States or Brazil may not see that same level of attraction in a country like South Korea. However, research has shown that there is a general bias when it comes to appearance in men. According to a 2025 study in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, link in the description, female participants hailing from both the United Kingdom and Japan were found to perceive men with more feminine features as more attractive. And this might show something to you that you might have already been hypothesizing. That women don't want manly men, they want pretty men. And we kind of see this portrayed in a character that is beloved by female audiences. Flynn from Tangled. He's the dashing, charming rogue character who befriends Rapunzel and ultimately finds love with her. And he is quite literally an amalgamation of what women would find attractive. And I say this because the Tangled team actually had a hot man meeting when designing the character of Flynn Rider. And to conduct this meeting, they asked various female employees at Disney to weigh in and bring pictures of Hollywood men that they deemed attractive. And the result is the iconic character that we know today. And while at a glance, Flynn does look like your typical attractive Disney prince with his triangle-shaped torso, broad shoulders, chin scruff, razor-sharp jawline, and apparently the secret to attracting a Disney princess, rolled up sleeves, if you take a closer look, you can actually see some feminine traits mixed in as well. For example, a clear, flawless complexion, rosy cheeks, thick, luscious hair, and long eyelashes. Thus, Flynn Rider turns out to look more like a Ken doll than a G.I. Joe. In fact, originally the Tangled animators wanted to go with a hyper-masculine approach to Flynn's design, but the women at Disney, during this hot man meeting, decided that they wanted his muscles and other exaggerated masculine features to be toned down, giving us the lean Flynn Rider that we know and love. This suggests that women in actuality don't want hyper-masculine men and prefer men who are more balanced in terms of having masculine and feminine features, as leaning heavily in one direction may be too much for them. And we see this reality in another Disney character, Gaston. Gaston from Beauty and the Beast is quite possibly the perfect embodiment of toxic masculinity. He is arrogant, and he believes that his physical strength and stature make him superior to other men. He lacks humility, emotional intelligence, and self-awareness, and considers these traits to be worthless. We, the audience, are supposed to dislike Gaston as he's framed as the villain. He also pursues Belle, but not out of love. He doesn't have an interest in her character or her intellect or find her interesting in any way. He simply sees Belle's beauty and decides that he wants her. He doesn't see Belle as a person with agency, he sees her as another beast to be conquered, as yet another trophy for his cabinet. Gaston is the embodiment of men who refer to themselves as alphas. They're pathetic in the sense that they need validation from others for their false sense of confidence. They have a sense of entitlement when it comes to women, and they use their arrogance as a mask for their insecurity. Gaston, as a character, is a complete satirization of the so-called manly man. But he also has the depth of a puddle, and while I would have liked to explore him more as a character, I also know that it would have hurt the messaging of Beauty and the Beast as a whole, that the real monsters are the ones on the inside. Besides, there's another character that I do want to talk about that initially comes off as incredibly arrogant and rude, but as the story progresses, he becomes more and more likable and is now one of the most celebrated characters in women's literature. Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice. And I'll mainly be referencing the 2005 movie because that's the version I'm most familiar with. So when Mr. Darcy first meets Elizabeth, she views him as cold and aloof, which is completely out of place considering they first met at a public ball, with the other characters dancing and merrymaking. Initially, there's a lot of awkward silence between Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth, and the latter even asks him to dance, and he sarcastically rejects her, annoying her. And to top things off, he tells his friend that she isn't all that, which understandably makes her view him in a not so fond manner. But it's eventually made clear that Mr. Darcy isn't as cold and arrogant as Elizabeth initially makes him out to be. At least in the film, it turns out he's just really bad at conversation, particularly with strangers. He's characterized as aloof because he's awkward and shy, especially in this scene where he goes to visit Elizabeth, says a single sentence to her, and then runs away. But his awkwardness isn't an excuse for his character flaws. He's uptight, he's quick to judge, and because of his blunt manner of speaking, he comes off as disrespectful at times, and this is made abundantly clear when he proposes to Elizabeth at Rosings. In the process of his confession of love, he insults Elizabeth's family, their social standing, implies that he's too good for her, and tells her he loves her against his better judgment. Elizabeth, completely flabbergasted by this whole ordeal, rightfully calls him out on his behavior and on the mistakes that she feels he's made in the past, and rejects his proposal. And this is the turning point for Mr. Darcy's character. He self-reflects on his flaws and takes the steps to becoming a better man. Elizabeth, and as a result we the viewers, find out that Mr. Darcy is actually incredibly caring. He is protective of his sister and the people closest to him. He's rich, but he's generous, paying for Mr. Wickham's and Lydia's wedding even when he didn't have to. He convinces his friend to propose to Elizabeth's sister after he initially judged them to not be good for each other, correcting his mistake and helping out the Bennet family in the process. Part of Mr. Darcy's redemption as a character may be because Elizabeth finds out more about him, but also because he takes the necessary steps to right his wrongs and become a better man in the process. And what's important to highlight is that he doesn't do these things to make Elizabeth magically fall in love with him. He does these things because they're the right thing to do, and it's within his power to do them. Mr. Darcy is humble enough to admit that despite his wealth and social stature in a time period and setting where those things were direct indicators of a man's worth, he still had room for growth. But I think what's important to point out is why he falls in love with Elizabeth. He doesn't fall for her just because he finds her pretty or beautiful, like Gaston does for Belle. Again, he initially isn't enchanted by her beauty, which is, how could you say that about a young Keira Knightley? But moving on, he falls for her because she makes him a better man. While everyone else is quick to accept the cold persona he puts on, Elizabeth is the only person that challenges him and his worldview. And on top of that, he sees how far she's willing to go for the people she loves. Unlike other men characterized in this time period like Mr. Collins, Mr. Darcy doesn't view Elizabeth as a woman to be won. He doesn't fall for her with something as surface level as her beauty, but for her character, for how she challenges him, and for how strongly she's capable of loving. Mr. Darcy's front of being a cold, emotionally distant man kind of reminds me of another character, one that I've actually talked about but not really, which is Flynn again. Or more specifically, Eugene Fitzherbert. Another big difference between how men and women view attraction is how much time it takes for either sex to fall in love. Research shows that men fall in love and express it earlier, and that women generally take their time when it comes to romance. Whether the causes are cultural or evolutionary, generally speaking, women take their time before they truly fall in love. But one thing about love is that it must be allowed to flourish. For love to form, emotional barriers between the lovers must be broken down and trust needs to be given. That's why I believe that two strangers cannot fall in love, and it is only when they stop being strangers does love truly begin to grow. But what does this have to do with Eugene? Well, it's simple, really. The beauty of Eugene Fitzherbert from Tangled is that we don't really meet him until about halfway through the film. The person that meets Rapunzel makes a deal with her to act as her guide, while she gives him the crown he stole and takes her on a wild adventure as Flynn, the swashbuckling, roguish persona that Eugene created to mask his insecurity. It's only when Eugene takes off his mask does Rapunzel actually start to fall for him, because this creates a sense of trust, a foundation for love to flourish. Eugene trusts Rapunzel enough to reveal his name to her and his backstory along with it, humanizing him, illustrating his depth as a person, and this also makes Rapunzel, as a woman, feel special. And what really shows this is in the scene where he reveals his name. He doesn't reveal his true identity as Eugene, as some sort of trump card to help him pick up women. He only shares his real name with Rapunzel as he genuinely believes they're about to die and wants at least one person to know who he really is. The first genuine moment that we, the audience, witness from this liar and thief. Note that it's implied that Flynn Rider is a ladies' man who attracts all kinds of women, but they only see the thief, the persona that is Flynn Rider. Only Rapunzel knows Eugene Fitzherbert. This makes her, a woman who's been alone and constantly belittled by Mother Gothel, feel unique after she's felt isolated and alone for the longest time. While the male gaze focuses on the initial hotness of the object of their desire, the female gaze focuses on the warmth of trust and emotional connection that they bear. But here's the thing about the male and female gazes of attraction though. They're not necessarily binary. Remember that the idea of the male and female gaze, as true or false as they may feel anecdotally, are merely theories. Just as people are a mix of features that are both masculine and feminine, people can view members of their preferred sex in a way that goes against the male and female gaze theories respectively. A woman can view a man as a sex object and nothing more, and that's totally fine, the same way a man can fall in love with a woman's person. But they're still useful as theories in helping us understand how people may view the world and in also shaping our own worldview. But it's important to remember that people are complex, and attraction is ultimately up to the individual, as everybody is different, but I don't think that the examples I've used so far in this video do a good job of illustrating that idea, because ultimately they are romances with the relationships between the male and female leads being central to the plot, so they're going to be exaggerated. So this last example shows romance from a woman's perspective, but not as a be-all end-all. Instead, it shows romance as what it really is, a mere portion of one's life and journey to self-discovery. Greta Gerwig's Lady Bird. In the film, Lady Bird, otherwise known as Christine, has two separate love interests. Early on in the film, she falls in love with a boy named Danny. From the moment she first sets eyes on him, she's immediately smitten with him. And automatically, this goes against the idea that women take longer to feel attraction. But here's the thing about Danny. He's also not a manly man by any means. He's not this suave, masculine smooth talker. In fact, the film shows that he's generally pretty awkward. He goes against the image of a man. Instead of being a strong, muscular character, he's skinny. And instead of having a typically manly hobby like sports, he's the male lead in a school's theater production. Eventually, the two characters fall in love and start dating. And while Lady Bird is initially smitten by his boyish charm, she falls in love with his warmth and the idea of a future with him. If the female gaze theory were unequivocal fact, Lady Bird and Danny would be endgame and would see how they end up together. But one of the things I love so much about this movie is that it shows that reality isn't so simple. Because this happens. Danny, despite everything that he went through with Lady Bird, cheats on her with another man, breaking her heart in the process. And so Lady Bird pursues a different guy, Kyle. Kyle is, for lack of a better term, an edgelord. His entire personality is him being different. He talks about anarchy, being anti-establishment, and how he doesn't believe in social constructs like phones. He's a pretentious character who is the type of person to read a book at a party. Danny was everything that Lady Bird had wanted before. He was stable, warm, and safe. But they met and kept meeting through something that she was initially interested in, which is theater. But after he broke her heart, Lady Bird goes through an identity crisis. Once she starts pursuing Kyle, she almost completely changes her character. She changes the way she does her hair, tying it up in a ponytail when beforehand, she almost always wore it down. And she reads the exact same book that she saw him reading. In chasing Kyle, she does things and surrounds herself with people that she has never known before. Her falling for a character that is so anti-establishment, after falling for a character that is so incredibly pro-tradition, embodies Lady Bird's shattered worldview through her romances. At this point in the story, everything she knew before got her hurt, so she's trying to find a new worldview to cling to. Eventually though, she realizes Kyle doesn't love her. After all, he doesn't pay attention to her. And aren't those two the same thing? He manipulates her, and that he expects her to put more effort than him. They break things off and Lady Bird eventually leaves Sacramento to go off to college in New York, where she ends up meeting a new guy. This shows that attraction and romance isn't so simple. There's this idea perpetuated in male spaces that women don't know what women want when it comes to attraction, but while in Lady Bird's experience that statement is true, this idea is quite frankly misogynistic. The truth is a lot more complex. Women, like all human beings, are in a constant process of self-discovery, and attraction and falling in love are simply parts of that process. A woman's attraction can change based on her personal experiences, life stage, present relationships, and other factors that even she herself may not be aware of. To say that women as a general whole love men who are emotionally open and intelligent is, in a way, just as damaging as saying that men only love women who have huge chests and childbearing hips. And that is why we, as individuals capable of critical thinking, should not take ideas such as the male gaze and female gaze as unequivocal fact. But that isn't to say that these general theories like the male and female gaze should immediately be dismissed, because ultimately there is some sort of truth to them. But the reason they're theories and not laws is because they're too general and there will always be exceptions. And that's what makes consuming different types of media so important. It gives you a healthy dose of perspective that you wouldn't otherwise see. And if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and a comment and let me know your thoughts down below. Subscribe if you're looking for more media deep dives like this one, and I hope to see you in the next.